The Iroquois League is made up of 6 Indian nations: the Cayuga, the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Seneca, and the Tuscarora. The Iroquois Indians were from what is now New York State. However, the Tuscarora Indians were originally from North Carolina and moved to New York to become part of the Iroquois League. Many Iroquois people still live in New York, but some have been forced to places such as Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and Ontario. The setup of power in the Iroquois League is often recognized as the first version of democracy. The setup of the Iroquois Confederacy is thought to have been a model for the American founding fathers when they created the new democracy. Tribes were like the states. The 50 sachems or chiefs were like the senators and congressmen. The honorary pine tree sachems were like the president and his cabinet, and the main village of Onondaga, where the Grand Council was held, was like Washington, D.C. The Iroquois Indians used elm bark to make their houses, which could be from 50 to 100 feet long and house up to 20 families. The longhouse became a symbol of the Confederacy, and the Indians thought of their league to occupy one big longhouse stretching over their entire territory. The Iroquois Indians were skilled in chasing and trapping animals that they used for food and clothing. The Iroquois were also skilled farmers, their main crops being corn, beans, and squash. These crops were considered the 3 sisters in their religion. Throughout the year, there were 3 festivals dedicated to the growing of corn, 2 related to wild plant foods, and also a New Year festival. The Iroquois believed that the most powerful spirit of all was Orenda, the Great Spirit and the Creator. Iroquois society was matrilineal. The women also owned the crops and chose the sachems. Iroquois boys developed military skills young, learning to use knives, clubs, and bows and arrows. By the time they were teenagers, they could participate in raids against other tribes. The Iroquois did not travel much, except for when hunting and occasionally making war. Women and children that were captured in raids were sometimes accepted into the Iroquois tribe, but male prisoners had to run the gauntlet. This is where prisoners had to run through 2 lines of men, women, and children who were lashing and beating them as they went. Those who made it may be accepted into the tribe. For entertainment, the Iroquois people often played sports, which included a more dangerous version of lacrosse and what they called snow snake, in which players would see who could slide a javelin the farthest along a trench of snow. The Iroquois Indians were not typically violent people, but during the Revolutionary War from 1775 to 1783, the Iroquois sided with the British and fought the Americans in hopes that this would stop Americans from stomping on their land. Perhaps the most famous instance of Iroquois resistance was when a Mohawk leader given the American name Joseph Brant raided the Cherry Valley settlement in 1778. They captured 40 American settlers and killed 32. In one more example of Iroquois resistance, George Washington sent an invading army into Iroquois land in 1779. The Iroquois put up such a fight that the American army could not defeat them in simple warfare, but eventually won by burning their houses and crops. George Washington was later referred to as Town Destroyer. The Iroquois League originated in 1570 as a confederacy of just 5 nations: the Cayuga, the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, and the Seneca. 2 men were responsible for the union of these tribes: Daganoweda, the peacemaker, who was a Huron prophet from the north, and Hiawatha, a Mohawk medicine man. In the early 1700s, the Tuscarora migrated to New York and joined the alliance as the 6th tribe in the Iroquois League. In upstate New York, the Iroquois depended a lot on the northern forests in their territory for food. They also relied heavily on the fertile soil to grow their crops. The local rivers were also very important when it came time to move. The Iroquois Indians were very fortunate to be in the location they were in, for without the resources that were naturally available to them, the tribe probably would not have survived. Obviously, one of the most important people to the Iroquois League was one of their founders, Hiawatha. Hiawatha helped create the Iroquois League by traveling through what would become Iroquois territory, preaching the message of unity and carrying a wampum belt that symbolized the great law of peace. His works were essential to forming the Confederacy. Another person that made a large impact on the Iroquois League, although not a part of the tribe, was George Washington. In 1779, he sent troops into Iroquois territories and set fire to houses and crops, as mentioned before. This loss forced the Iroquois Indians to surrender to Americans, who eventually pushed them out of their homeland to Canada, were small reservations. This act scattered the Iroquois and changed their tribe forever. Now Iroquois Indians live on reservations in New York, Ontario, Quebec, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma. Representatives of the Six Nations still meet in council and recite the Great Law. There are currently 2 Grand Councils, one at the traditional state of Onondaga in central New York and another at the Grand River, Ontario.